One of my girls, when they were little, when they didn't like what you were telling them, they would put their fingers in their ears. And as a parent, I would have to stop and go, no, 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 you're going to hear what I have to say. But my daughter, she was like, no, no, I don't want to hear it. I know what you're saying and I don't like what you're saying, so I'm not going to hear it. Well, that's not dissimilar to what the Pharisees did with Jesus. Welcome to Walking Through the Word. We're in John chapter 9, and we're in the last several verses starting in verse 35, because we've had this whole conversation where the Pharisees got schooled by the formerly blind man who was healed by Jesus, and they didn't like the answers. So this is happening a little bit later. Jesus hears in verse 37 that they had thrown this formerly blind man out, and when Jesus found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" Now remember, the Son of Man is a reference to Daniel. In other words, this is a Messiah conversation here. So when when Jesus says, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" the man understands the Son of Man they're talking about is the Messiah. This is not some mythical, whoa, what is this Son of Man thing? No. The man knows exactly the reference to the Son of Man, and he says, "Who is he? Can you tell me that I can believe in him? We've been waiting for the Messiah. We've been waiting for this guy. Jesus, tell me who it is." And Jesus said, "You've now seen him. In fact, he is the one you're speaking with." And immediately the man said, "Lord, I believe," and he worshiped him. See, this man was physically blind, but he was not spiritually blind. And when he became able to see physically, he didn't lose his spiritual sight. So he recognized who Jesus was. He recognized who Jesus was before then. He said it very clearly in verse 31. We know that God does not listen to sinners. He listens to the godly person who does his will. Nobody's ever heard of opening the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could not do this. He could do nothing. So this man immediately recognized who Jesus was, and he hit the ground worshiping him. Ironically enough, there were some Pharisees who saw this encounter, who were with him and heard him say this and asked, "What? Are we blind too?" And Jesus' answer is rough. He says, if you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin. In other words, if you honestly, genuinely could not see, you wouldn't be guilty. But now you have claimed to be able to see. In other words, what, are we blind too? We're not blind. We can see what's going on here. Now that you claim you can see, your guilt remains. When we see the things that Jesus does and we choose to ignore them, when the world sees and reads about Scripture and reads about the Messiah and ignores it, the guilt remains. This is called willful blindness. This is willful disobedience, where someone says, I see this, but I refuse to believe it. I see and I read what's happening here with this Jesus guy. I'm not interested. It's too much. It costs me too much. Or it makes me uncomfortable. Or it takes me to places that I don't want to go. Regardless of the person's reasoning, they have now looked at it and said, I am willfully blind. This is very similar in the story of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and when you see the last battle book that C.S. Lewis writes, and you recognize that there are some dwarves, the dwarves are representative of the Jews in this case, who are willfully refusing to recognize the existence of Aslan. Even when they're thrown into the barn for death, they walk around blindly, refusing to acknowledge the Messiah, refusing to acknowledge Aslan. This is exactly what happens in the world. We will, if we're not careful, have a form of spiritual blindness. And even as followers of Christ, we can be caught up, not in losing our salvation, but caught up in the idea of not recognizing when God is doing things, when God is moving, and when God is working. Discernment is a huge part of being a follower of Christ. But it's not discernment with the idea of, I'm not going to believe anything that happens, but instead it's discernment going, God, show me where you really are. Reveal yourself to me, God. Make myself less. You must increase. I must decrease. Show me, God, where you're moving so that I may be a part of it. It's not disobedience to ask God to show and be discerning. As a matter of fact, that's exactly what Jesus wants us to do. He wants us to use our spiritual eyes, if you will, to see where he is and go there. Not remain willfully blind, not remain willfully ignorant, but instead go where the Spirit prompts us. Otherwise, we end up just like the dwarves, wandering around in the dark barn, just like the Pharisees wandering around when the Messiah is literally standing right in front of them, missing him.